From Key Biscayne, Florida, this is Antisocial, the radio show, podcast, and sometimes on YouTube show where we look at current events and figure out what's going on and especially how it's playing on social media. I'm Tony Winton.
In the criminal justice system, the people are represented by two yet equally important groups.
Well, Tom, come on now.
What?
You talking about that?
Yeah.
That's next week's show.
No. It says here on my notes. It says we have a very special guest joining us, Kathy Fernandez-Rundle, right now.
Well, it turns out that's a week from today. But that happens in the legal system all the time. Things get delayed. It's called a continuance. That's what we have, a continuance.
Justice spin slowly. No, we have instead a very special guest, my good friend and a good friend of this show, Fernand Amandi, political strategist, pollster, public opinion guy. He's the guy. He's the smartest guy on the radio right now. Fernand, welcome to the show.
Tom, Tony, always a pleasure to be back with you.
So, in full fairness, I called Fernand, a minute ago and told him that we made a mistake on when our guest was coming on. Can he step in? So Fernand has no idea what we're going to talk about. This is going to be like a game show. It's going to be what's my topic?
I'm like Kirk Gibson in the 88 series. I'm off the bench, unexpected.
Yep.
And I'm just trying not to strike out here with you guys.
No. I'm looking for the home run. I know what you got in you, man.
Well, okay. So I guess, if we go to that format for what we're doing, I guess is we should do things like in the form of a question. Your answer has to be in the form of a question.
That's Jeopardy. We're not doing that.
Okay.
We'll do what's my line?
This municipal county in South Florida has an unusual political season happening with a elected race starting much earlier than previously done.
What is the Miami-Dade County mayor's race, Tony?
Very good, Tom.
Okay, so that's what we're doing. Well, I'll take Danielle.
South Florida politics for 1,000?
Yes. Fernand, why am I getting emailers asking for money this early in a campaign season for a Miami-Dade County election?
Because the incumbent is scared. That's why.
Really? What is she scared of?
She saw the results of the 2022 election when the once unthinkable came to pass, which is a Republican carried Miami-Dade County, and they didn't just carry it with by a few thousand votes. Ron DeSantis carried the county, as did Marco Rubio, with room to spare. And even though the county mayor's race technically is a nonpartisan race, the three of you and all of our listeners know there's no such thing as a nonpartisan race anymore in these times we find ourselves in. So I think Mayor Levine Cava understands that she's going to have a fight on her hands. And everybody's like, oh, well, she'll be fine because it'll be on the presidential ballot. That's not quite how it works. First, there's an August primary, which if the winner gets 50% plus one, it does not need to go to a November election, which would, I think, still be a more safe ground, if you will, for Mayor Levine Cava, with the caveat that Ron DeSantis is not the Republican nominee. If that is the case, if Ron DeSantis somehow manages to win the Republican nomination for president and is the Republican nominee in November of 2024 and still, at least in Florida and in Miami-Dade, enjoys the type of support he saw in November of 2022, that could be a problem for Mayor Levine Cava if she's facing off against a strong Republican challenger.
A challenger like?
Well, the list is long and distinguished in a place like ours, not necessarily because I agree with any of them, but because there would be well-funded, high-profile Republicans. You're talking about folks like the current Lieutenant Governor, Jeanette Nunez, who there is heavy talk that she is looking very carefully at this race. Another contender, potentially, is the former mayor of Miami-Dade County himself, Carlos Jimenez, who's now in the U.S. Congress. There's talk that he doesn't quite like the legislator role. He wants to go back to being an executive and the big fish in the small pond, so that the talk that he might, and he's even admitted he hasn't ruled out running for county mayor. So those two would be enough, I think, to certainly cause Mayor Levine Cava to look at it with a little bit of trepidation.
And I was going to add, what about our commissioner here in District 7?
Well, that would be Commissioner Raquel Regalado. I think she is also one that has made some noise about the possibility of running for that race. I'm not sure she would challenge maybe some of the more higher profile, more established Republicans if they tried to go for the seat, because I think the Republicans see this seat as a trophy that they'd like to hang back on their wall of trophies. So I think they're going to try and clear the path for one Republican to take on Mayor Levine Cava. But yes, if those two, whether it's Congressman Jimenez or the Lieutenant Governor Nunez passes, then I think you might have Commissioner Regalado take a look at the race. So there's no shortage of contenders, and that's why I think you see Mayor Levine Cava getting an early and a head start on trying to define the re-election race on her terms.
So in marketing terms, there's a real danger with getting out too early because you burn out your creative long before the actual election. Do you see that as a danger here? Is she out too early, and by the time we roll around to say November of 2023, are people going to be like, yeah, I'm done, I don't need to listen to her anymore, there's nothing new to hear, nothing new to say, leaving the field wide open for her opponents to bring their messages to bear?
Tom, I mean, I know that there are some that think that in this case and in this race, I do not share that philosophy, especially because this is a race that is a referendum on her first 4-year term. She's running for re-election. And anytime you have an incumbent running again, oftentimes the terms of the race are about whether that person should be rehired again and be given another, in this case, 4 years to continue the role. So it's to her advantage to define herself, to define what she's done and why she should be reelected before it's settled on who her contenders are going to be, particularly if there is competition amongst many for the challenger role.
Did we learn anything from the recent District 2 City of Miami special election that would be useful to peer into what might be going on politically in Miami-Dade?
I'm not sure that's the case. That's a district that has historically been held by a Democrat. It's the district that took in most of Coconut Grove, certainly, until it was recently redrawn. And I think, if anything, we saw that the partisanship is a factor in these races. Even though that was a nonpartisan race, Sabina Covo, who was the winner, fully embraced the support of the Democratic Party, campaigned as the Democrat, put out a lot of her messaging and communication centered around that premise. So I think it just shows you that these partisan seats and these nonpartisan seats, I should say, are always going to have these partisan overtones, particularly in districts or races where partisanship is going to mean potentially the difference between victory and defeat.
Last question on the local stuff, then we'll get into some national stuff. Key Biscayne is widely seen as, one of the wealthiest zip codes on the East Coast.
I think it's the wealthiest in this area.
And certainly it is the pot of gold at the beginning of every campaign rainbow. How much should the residents of Key Biscayne be buckling up right now that DLC's out raising money? Who else is going to be asking them for money, and how soon?
Well, if the beauty of caller ID these days is if you see the Mayor Levine Cava come up on the ID, you can always hit decline or be convenient.
She's not inviting you to dinner.
She's not inviting you to meet the president or go to the mayor's ball.
Well, maybe, but there'll be a price tag for that.
Always. That's the rule, unfortunately, of politics these days. And look, I mean, all kidding aside, we know, Tom, and Tony, this is a very expensive county to run media in. This is easily going to be a multi-million-dollar race. I wouldn't be surprised if the total spend actually gets to the $10 million range.
Wow.
I was going to say, how compared to, say, an average, congressional district, where does it sit?
Well, look, I mean, I don't think it's an exaggeration or hyperbole to say the mayor of Miami-Dade County is arguably the second most powerful political position in the entire state of Florida. they oversee a budget in excess of $6 billion. You have a strong executive mayor responsibility, and this is the most populous county in the state. So these are high stakes. We know the importance of Florida politically, at least from the perspective of both sides. And as I said at the outset, the Republicans would love nothing more than to plant a beachhead or maybe even a stake in the heart of hopes of Democrats to stage a Florida-style comeback by capturing the premier post in the county that was thought to be the heart of the Democratic vote for the state.
Well, and let me follow up on that, and then we'll take a break and ask some of the national stuff because it ties into the national. Where is the National Democratic Party? We just had an election for a new statewide chair who is just taking the reins here after this. I don't think anyone would disagree with the word disastrous performance from a Democratic point of view of what happened in November. How much rebuilding is there to do? How big is the task?
Well, Tony, do you want the good news or the bad news?
I just want the news.
The good news is the National Democratic Party is alive and well, and they're enjoying the benefits of having control of the executive branch and still having held the Senate majority. The bad news is that if you're a Florida Democrat, at least, the National Democratic Party has said adios amigos, at least for the foreseeable, if not maybe in word, certainly in deed. They have pulled up stakes here. They see Florida as the wonderful juice here, not necessarily being worth the squeeze, especially given the cost and the complicated and torturous results of 25 years of abject futility, with very few exceptions.
All right. Well, with that as a tee-in for our next segment, we'll be back in just a second.
Keep us game, island paradise. Keep us game, island paradise. Let me go down the trails to the North Point.
And we are back. This is Antisocial. I'm Tom Mazloom, my co-host Tony Winton, and our guest Fernand Amandi. Now we're switching gears, Fernand, to national politics, and you just got done.
Emergency guest.
Yes, our pinch hitter,
Right.
Our very good friend for answering the phone at all.
That's
knowing
400.
what time it was.
Absolutely.
No. We need to send him. We need to send Fernando Joe Stone Crab on us. I think is what we're going to have to do.
All right.
But you just made a really good and interesting point about the National Democratic Party no longer looks at Florida as a swing state. In fact, they've pulled up stakes. This is a bright red state as far as they're concerned. What impact does that have on all local elections from this point on?
Well, I mean, Tom, you put your finger on the issue. I mean, it has a tremendous impact because, it's one thing, even if it's a state that you don't think you can win, you at least want to keep the opposition honest. You want to keep them engaged and spending money. Things can change, but if the current attitude towards Florida maintains, you're not going to see candidates being able to raise money, candidates even being able to necessarily be recruited into some of these races. So if you don't have candidates, you don't have money, you don't have a political operation, it creates this kind of cycle of futility and this problematic challenge. That can be somewhat self-contained, and the damage may be not as bad in some areas over others because, a race like county mayor, for example, we touched on earlier, you still have a demographic advantage in a county like Miami-Dade because you have a lot of Democrats still who call Dade home, a lot of independents who voted in the past. But it becomes much more problematic at the statewide level. And as it would affect the balance of power in Congress, some of these congressional districts that are on the margins may not even be contested because there is no national or statewide infrastructure anymore in Florida.
In terms of the way that the Democrats approach the election, particularly at the federal level, what is this? What is the output there of taking Florida? I mean, you said writing off the board. Does that mean all the resources shift elsewhere and people are here to fend for themselves?
Yeah, but unfortunately, that has also a multiplier effect, Tony, because take, for example, they've spent some ungodly amounts of money in Florida alone in cycles over the last 20 years, whether it's between, $300 and $400 million. So if that money's not going to be spent here, and it basically signals to the Republicans, you don't have to fight to contest Florida, that means they can start being on offense in other states. Money that they would have used to otherwise defend Florida now maybe can go to Pennsylvania, Arizona, Georgia, Nevada, Michigan, Wisconsin, states that aren't necessarily being won dramatically by the Democrats either. So, it's a little bit of a challenge, but yeah, that's one of the byproducts.
And we had a long discussion with Nikki Fried while she was running for state party chair here in Florida. But what is your, if I can ask you, what is your diagnosis of the root problem in a state that voted for Barack Obama twice? How did it get? I mean, it's great news if you're a Republican and that the party, but how did it? What is your diagnosis? I'd be curious.
Tony, you're asking a question that only Tom Masloon can answer without me sounding like a complete jerk on this program. So, and Tom,
we are
factor, Tom. I don't know.
No, listen. We'll be pouring a glass of Jack Daniels soon, and maybe we'll record that conversation, and we'll get everybody's answer on that.
As long as it's not a cabal, that's the only thing.
Yes, a cabal of wokeness or whatever that statement was.
Tony, I'll answer your question by actually expressing to you, and I don't think it's any secret. I'm a Democrat, and I'm a proud Democrat. I've been working in Democratic politics nationally and in Florida for well over a quarter century. But just take even, you alluded to the Florida Democratic Party chairs race. To me, that was a completely broken process. It is endemic and speaks to why Florida continues to be a state where Democratic failures are compounded. Because if you look at what was done there, the choice was not to first pick a party chair, in my judgment. The choice was to ask the question that you asked. Are Democrats going to concede Florida? Are they going to sacrifice Florida? Or are they going to make a good faith effort to try and make it competitive again? And if the answer to the question is no, of course we're not going to sacrifice Florida, then the follow-up question is, all right, who should be chair? No. The question should have been, all right, well, who is then committed? What entity or entities together are willing to invest the $80 to $100 million over 8 to 10 years with infrastructure to build out the real workings of a political party? And that is going to require a lot of that money up front in seed money. And out of that then, Tony and Tom, once that money was pledged and committed, those individuals to say, we trust this person or these people to execute this plan. The Democrats, unfortunately, did it completely ass backwards by deciding who the leader was before they came up with a plan or even commitment for a plan. So I was very critical of this process, and I hope I'm wrong because I'm a Democrat and I want the new chair to succeed, but I just don't see this as the formula for recalibration.
Tony, and to echo Fernand, and Fernand, dive in here. I think what's going on is that a lot of folks on the Democratic side view what's going on in Florida right now as a cult of personality. It's being carried by Ron DeSantis. And as soon as he's gone, the state could get back to some sense of equilibrium. Republicans, on the other hand, say this is a massive ideological shift in Florida that they have seen because Florida has now taken the lead in national politics and has its performance through the pandemic and beyond has demonstrated that that free state of Florida thing really has caught on. Fernand, what do you are you with me on that, or which side do you fall on?
I hate to find myself agreeing with every word you said because, unfortunately, I've been around long enough to see that, once is an anomaly, twice maybe a coincidence, but three times is a pattern, and that is the game the Democrats play. It's this cult of personality. Well, once Jeb Bush is gone, he was the most powerful governor. He's the son of the former president, brother of the president. Then we'll be able to win this thing back. And then it was, once Charlie Crist is gone, he's the suntan Charlie. He's a gifted politician. Then we can win. Well, maybe we can even recruit him to become a Democrat. That didn't work out so well. Then it was, well, once Rick Scott is gone, he's an alien from another planet.
He is an alien from another planet, Fernand. He is. These are facts you are stating.
He is, right, but he's an alien with $800 million that he's shown he's willing to spend.
Yes, of his own money.
And now, you've seen the movie before. It's the Ron DeSantis show. And so, look, Democrats have this Messiah complex in that they're waiting for the Messiah. They're waiting for Moses to lead them out of the pasture, as opposed to recognizing it needs to be an entire systematic, comprehensive project of all the tribe working hand in hand together.
And that is an interesting observation. But I want to go back to Tom's question, which was more about an ideological shift. And I guess what I would ask you is there a corresponding change in the way that people view major issues in polling? Whether it is gun control or social safety nets or any of the many kind of domestic issues that you could poll on. Are you seeing, in terms of what people want from their government, are you seeing that kind of a shift as well that might be more typical in a quote unquote, red state?
Tony, what I'm seeing is a shift of a different sort, and it is a foot shuffling shift. And what I mean by that is what has happened is that Florida, over the last, I would say, 5 years, especially since Trump became president, since DeSantis was elected and subsequently reelected, and then, of course, the pandemic, has become Mecca for MAGA, so to speak. This is safe space, safe ground. If you're a Republican, MAGA conservative, and you are a boomer, and you're in your retiring years, and you want to get out of what you see as, ridiculous Illinois or crazy New York, not my perspective, but from their perspective, what better place to come to and live out the rest of your years where there's no state income tax, where the weather is pretty darn good. So you've seen this massive influx of like-minded folks that I think is recalibrating and reconstituting the voter makeup of the state of Florida. At the same time, I think there are a lot of...
It's a transfusion of a different blood type.
That's correct. At the same time, there are people maybe more of my ideological persuasion that are saying, well, maybe Florida's not the place for me anymore. So you see that process in real time where people are coming in and people are leaving, and it's because we're so polarized as a country, and Florida has become one of the most political states with a political brand and attitude. Just ask your governor. It's acting as a magnet, and it is drawing in, and it's changing the composition electorally of the state.
So, Fernand, you used a term in your response, MAGA, which is the talking point of the Democratic side. There's no such thing as a conservative or a Republican in the Democratic vernacular anymore. They're all labeled MAGA. And that is a campaign move to try to paint all conservatives or anybody who ever voted Republican with the same broad brush. How long do you think that is going to hold before it starts blowing up in Democrats' faces as being, oh, my God, you guys you're just going to label that on everybody. You're going to paint everybody with the same broad brush.
Well, I mean, Tom, you know from branding and marketing that if something works, you don't stop doing it, you quadruple down. And Republicans have lost 3 national elections in a row under the MAGA brand. The Republican Party is the party of MAGA because Trump is the leader of the Republican Party. Until he is vanquished, until someone wins the Republican nomination under a non-MAGA branding, which none of them seem willing to do, it is the MAGA party. And that's why I think you see not just Democrats, but thoughtful observers of the political process call this Republican Party today the MAGA party, because that's what it is.
I think we should go with Tony's. Tony's version of blood type, using the Trump followers as R negative, and regular old conservatives like me are positive. How about that? Can we do that?
I mean, sure. It doesn't mean the Democrats are going to stop calling.
No,
No.
never.
All right, Fernand Amandi, thank you again for being emergency guest, and
You are awesome,
We will
dude.
have to. You're fantastic, and with the great observations, and we appreciate you're being such a good friend of the show. And I will personally take Tom up, and we will see you at Joe's.
What are you guys doing next? What are you guys doing next Thursday?
Wait a minute. Listen, always be closing, always on message. As much as Joe's is my favorite restaurant on the planet.
Okay.
But how are we doing the Key Biscayne show and going to Joe's for lunch? There's got to be a place on the Key. If we're going to do it, let's do it on the Key somewhere, right? Or no?
Fair enough. Absolutely. And I'm sure the Key Biscayne Chamber of Commerce, and I know those folks listen to the show, will find a spot.
By the way, if you're listening right now and you happen to own a restaurant, this space is available for rent. If you'd like to buy advertising on Antisocial, now would be the time to call. Thanks, Fernand.
Thank you, sir.
Let's do a live simulcast, right?
I love it.
All
Yeah,
right.
from lunch from some restaurant. We'll do it.
There you
That
go.
sounds great.
All right, Jen.
Be well.
All right, see ya.
And we will be back right after.
Biscayne, island paradise. Key Biscayne, island paradise.
Tony Winton.
I'm Tom Moss.
We go down the trails to
That's the pinch hitter you want, man. Fernand
Listen,
is the guy you want on the air in the emergency.
when life gives you lemons, you want someone who can make really good lemonade.
Yeah,
And
that was
what we
so
just
funny.
heard, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, that's so funny. I mean, he is a bleeding heart liberal, but I mean, it's fine. You are too, so it's fine.
I'm just a journalist, my friend.
Proof that we
yes.
can get along despite our political differences.
Well, but it is fascinating just looking at it, looking just by the numbers. You start as the question I asked was go back and not once but twice. A Democrat wins the presidency, carries Florida, and in the space of that time, the state has politically realigned. I don't think there's really any debate about that.
Mm-hmm.
And you have a state that did that twice, but still has had unbroken trifecta of GOP control of the governor's mansion
it's gotten
and
more.
the state houses. And if anything, now reaching into all these other levels. It's like a huge logical disconnect. So you ask yourself what's going on, and that's Fernand's his opinion of what has been happening. I think it's fascinating.
Yeah, no. There's definitely a shift, and I definitely don't believe it's cult of personality Ron DeSantis. I think that there is a definite ideological shift throughout the state that is pushing the state more rightward. And a lot of it has to do with bad Democratic policies. The further left that Democratic policies have gotten, the more it turns off Florida populace. Now, I don't why. I mean, it's that's anybody's guess. But
To me, that's interesting, right? So, what policies in particular are you talking about? Because
we
if
know
you look
that
at things like minimum wage or the cost of housing or a lot of other things,
that's not what they've been campaigning on. The Democrats don't campaign on that. They can't,
right, but
they campaign on Green New Deal and the whole defund the police fiasco. That's a campaign loser. If you're campaigning in South Florida on issues that sound remotely like big government socialism, the people who fled socialist countries aren't going to vote for you. That's not going to happen.
And there you go. This is your field: messaging, staying on message, all this other stuff. Instead of talking about economic bread and butter issues that seem to work well in other places, the conversation seems to drift into other areas. And what I heard in that conversation with Fernand is kind of like an appeal to say, "Hey, look, we've got a lot of work to do. Let's stop trying to swing for the fences." And get behind an 8-run deficit by bringing a strong batter to the bat. That ain't going to do it. No,
You
can't hit up. You can't. It's like when I went to college and we had one really great. We had a worst football team in Division 1A, and we had really one pro league player. He was the quarterback, and boy, could he throw. But when that's the only play you have, you're going to get beat almost every time.
Yeah, and Florida has a complex. We always want to be in the national spotlight, and Florida politics seems to forget, particularly on the Democrat side, not necessarily so on the Republican side, that all politics is local. You have to be speaking to your base locally. And, nationally, throughout the state, the Democrats have followed the national lead. They use national talking points because national money has flowed in. Now, they're going to rely on local money. The national money has left, so they're going to have to change their message, distance themselves from the national Democratic policies and talking points, and really speak at a local level. It is an opportunity for them. I don't know that they're up for it. That's my take on the issue.
Interesting.
What is on your social media feeds, Tony? What have you been looking at?
Well, I hate to get into we had a pre-show conversation, and the problem with that is that I have to always look at the clock, sadly. And we're at 32 minutes, and this one is more than a 3-minute conversation. But I do think we should look at J6. You mentioned that with Fernand.
So you and I could argue about it again?
We could argue about that again. And
I love you. I don't want to argue anymore.
A certain Fox News host who what's going on? I don't know. We could talk about this stuff. You pointed something out to me, kind of an interesting case that is the facts are a little shaky on.
Texas Tech basketball coach. It's an interesting story because it's interesting the way it was rolled out in the news. I have to believe there's more to it than that.
Yeah, I mean, you have this report. He's let go. Is it because he cited some Bible verses that, for our listeners who haven't seen this or follow this, reportedly, and the sourcing is kind of shaky, he allegedly said something about a Bible verse that mentioned slavery, but we don't know which Bible verse. We don't know what he said. We don't know what the reaction, the context of the comment, and a conversation with a student athlete, and that led, or was the coup de grace, so to speak, for his termination after a losing season, right?
A miserable season. So we're talking about Texas Tech. Their basketball coach, Mark Adams, was let go, and the school is calling it for an inappropriate, unacceptable, and racially insensitive comment. The sourcing is that this is according to the school, not according to Coach Adams. According to the school, he was encouraging a player to be more receptive to coaching, and in doing that, referenced a Bible verse about workers, teachers, parents, and slaves serving their masters, and that really upset the student. When Adams found out, he apologized, but that was not enough. So the speculation is that he has a clause in his contract that says that if he's let go without cause, he's owed 60% of what's remaining on his contract, which is like more than $7 million at this point. But if they could let him go for cause, they don't have to pay him. That's the insinuation I get, and it's being blathered about on my social media feeds because, as you know, I'm a sports fan, and this is what floods my account on days like this.
It's this kind of, how should I put it this way? My thing is like, well, first of all, what actually happened and what was actually said, right? And we
don't know.
Don't really know. You can certainly think of a situation where that could be really insensitive and would merit that. That's not hard to imagine, but we don't know exactly the context of that.
But you're going to muddy the waters. The school is putting the information out, not the Adams camp. The school is putting the information out. Why even bring up the part that it's a Bible verse? That is going to, just the fact that that's out there, people are going to flip out about.
Right. So I'm looking, I guess, at an older version of the story where, this is attributing this to sources and not directly to a statement from the school. But that's interesting that they're reacting to, to that event that way. We'll keep an eye on it and report back if there seems to be any legs to that story, as we'd say in the newsroom.
Yeah. All right. What's going on in the Key? What do we have to keep our eye on?
Well, we are getting ready for our next issue. I don't want to tease it too much because we have a couple of, I think, pretty significant announcements coming forward, but I'm not ready to make it news yet. Sometimes the soup isn't ready and it isn't ready right now. But I will say that,
is it an embargoed story? Is that what we're saying, or
yeah,
it's not. All right.
I will say that we have been moving in the direction of not just the Key Biscayne Independent, but Miami Fourth Estate, our nonprofit, in developing more resources to get into other areas of news coverage. And I can tell you that one of the things will be about that. The other one will be about the ripoff.
I'm ready. Is Mike Davey competing? Do we know?
I don't know whether he's still eligible to be on the Village People. I know I think he would be with that team. There's a lot of, for those of you who don't know, we compete now in the annual Key Biscayne Rib-Off, a charity event, which is April 15th. So if you want some of the best ribs you've ever had in your life, come down to Key Biscayne.
Specifically to our tent.
Our tent.
The Meet the Press.
Meet the Press, that's correct. And our team is Tom and I and my brother Dan, who actually
who's the ringer.
He's the ringer, and Joey Fletches from the Miami Herald.
Also a great guest on the show.
Yes,
he was my next call, by the way. If Fernand didn't pick up, I was calling Joey next.
So Joey will be with us, and it's a great charity event because you're supporting a charity that basically pays a medical scholarship. It's named after Dr. Bob Kemper, a beloved family physician here on the Key. He was my doctor years ago, and it's a really great event. So April 15th, we'll talk about that a little bit as well.
All right. Well, speaking of great events and charities to support, how about this one? If what you've heard today is important to you, if the news you get in the Key Biscayne Independent is important, we would ask you for your donation. It's a fantastic resource for people living on the Key, interested in Key Biscayne, or living around the Biscayne Bay for that matter. You won't get news like this anywhere else, so I would ask you to go to kbindependent.org and click the Donate Now button.
And you will have our thanks.
Yep. Yay! All right, my friend, I guess that about wraps up our, what is this, show number 10 in our 7th season?
Yeah, I think so. We're pretty high on the show list for 7th season.
Yeah, midway through. All right, video. Well, I'm Tom Mosloom.
I'm Tony Winton.
Be safe, everyone.
This way.